Guests Ruthie Bloom, Adi Schwartz, and Yariv Oppenheimer talking politics as we do here on the Spin Room. Adi, we were talking before the break about Gantz's phone and Netanyahu's stocks, which is suddenly a news story. You know, when this election started, is that what you thought the main topics, the main issues were going to be about?
I think this is a very good example of how little substance there is in these elections. It's more about the style of Benjamin Netanyahu. I think that actually Gantz and his party recognized well that the Israeli public is quite satisfied with the policies and what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing in terms of our relationship with other countries in the Middle East, economics, etc. What some people are not are dissatisfied with is more issues of his wife and his son. They're kind of sick and tired of this whole Miri Regev issues of
the culture minister,
yeah, exactly, and other members of Knesset.
You mean the way they handle themselves at the home and how they run the residence and stuff like that.
And this is why I think that people kind of like, we don't want Bibi, we can continue his policies, but we don't want Netanyahu anymore. This is the people who will continue and vote for Gantz.
Right. You know, I mean, the issue that's high on your party's agenda, and that you're vocal, you, Yariv, all the time, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, nobody's really talking about that.
Actually, the right wing is talking about it. The parties that are more in the left are trying to avoid talking about it because this is the way that they think that they can bring some votes from the right wing. Gantz is using the corruption because for him it's some kind of a comfort zone. He doesn't have to speak about now the Golan Heights or the West Bank or settlements and to show that he's similar to Netanyahu or he's different from Netanyahu. He's not a lefty, therefore he's focusing on more civil issues and more corruption, less about peace talks and Palestinians.
Before we go to the polls, I wanted to respond quickly.
Yes, especially since Gantz, every time he has, rarely, but whenever he opens his mouth, anything he says about policy is something that Netanyahu is already doing or has already accomplished. And so, what does he have to sell? Nothing.
Well, a lot of people say that
he's not Bibi.
Except that he's not Bibi. Exactly.
Let's be honest, I don't want to destroy his campaign, but when you look at the nuance, and he's talking about looking for ways for peace and about the fact that Israel will have to be in some places rather than being in the whole land. And eventually when you look at the list, you can see right-wing people, but you can also see people that are more to the left.
Nuances. I think if you look back at his, inauguration speech, he said, "I don't want to be with all these clowns that Bibi has around him." So this is the main issue. I will be more, representative. I will not be this chaotic management like Bibi has.
Okay, I want to bring up some polls and let's get some reaction from you guys about this one. This is from two channels, main channels in Israel. Yesterday, Channel 12 with Gantz leading 5 seats over the Likud, 32 they have blue and white to Likud's 27. Your party there, Yariv, with only 4, just above the threshold. And Channel 13, Gantz leading with a smaller lead, just 2 seats over Netanyahu. Blue and white there have 31, and the Likud have 29. I think we can agree that it looks like the phone hacking scandal didn't hurt Benny Gantz. But when it comes, Ruthie, to, I think what's more important, and the right versus left blocks, we do see a consistent trend. The right is still leading an average of about 64 to 56, which is pretty big lead.
And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that, you see, the Israeli public, in spite of what the politicians seem to think in their ridiculous ads and their fighting about corruption and telephones, is that the public actually does pay attention to what's going on in the region. And what the public has come to realize is that the Palestinians have no interest in statehood, and what they do have an interest in is destroying the state of Israel. And that is why the right wing consistently beats the left wing in Israel today.
I'm not so sure, by the way, that the Orthodox religious people, all of them are voting because of this issue. I'm not so sure that the people that are voting for Kahlon are voting because of the Palestinians. There are other issues, and we are taking Kahlon and the Orthodox...
Moshe Kahlon, the finance minister.
Yeah, we are talking them together and mention them like they are in the pocket of Netanyahu. I'm doubting. I don't even know if Feiglin, the new phenomenon...
Yariv, why isn't the left managing to bring more people to the left-wing bloc? It's consistently about 6 to 7, 8 seats always for the right wing in all the polls for the past months.
I wish I will know the answer, then I will implement it. I don't know the answer. It's not one button that you can push and then people will move. But for sure,
Adi wants to help you. Go ahead, Adi. What's the
maybe we should change the policy, and this is something that I don't think that we should do, because eventually you are fighting for something.
For one thing, you should stop being socialist,
people are looking
and
for
then maybe that would help.
in Israel when you look at the
social justice is part of capitalism.
I think the bigger issue is the policy vis-a-vis the Palestinians. I tend to agree with Ruti. Rabin had 44 members in the Knesset. It wasn't that far. Barak won. But since then, the left has not adapted to a paradigm shift that happened. Twice Palestinians in 2000, 2008 refused peace deal. And the Israeli public have noticed that and said, okay, there is no partner right now. And if you look at the parties that are trying to challenge the way of Netanyahu, they get 4 seats or 10 seats if you look at the Labour. Whereas Gantz, who's not saying anything about 2 states and is trying to kind of muddle his message, gets 30 seats. So that's a message from the Israeli public. Listen, guys, it's not going to happen.
I feel in this orchestra, everyone has its own instrument. And Gantz's role is to bring people from the right wing. This is what he has to do. Meretz support and Labour Party should bring up the flags of the left wing and to say, yeah, we are part of this coalition. But I think that if your theory is right and the Palestinian thing is the cause of that, so the outcome is different, because Gantz is not dealing with the Palestinian and still doesn't seem to bring enough people from the right.
Gantz is also trying to get votes from the left. He would rather destroy the Labour Party and take and have those people.
He's making a big mistake, because if Meretz or Labour Party will not be in the next Knesset, he will lose.
Okay, I want to talk a little about diplomacy, because I have a feeling that's going to be on the top of our agenda in the next week or two, because Israeli and U.S. officials said they expect an announcement on U.S. recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights soon, maybe as early as next week, when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visits Washington. Last week, in its annual human rights report, the State Department dropped the phrase Israeli occupied from the Golan Heights section, instead calling it Israeli controlled. Let's hear Netanyahu's remarks on the issue yesterday during the press conference with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who was on a 2-day visit to Israel, and what Senator Lindsey Graham said on the issue last week during his visit to the Golan.
I think it's time that the international community recognize Israel's stay in the Golan, the fact that the Golan will always remain part of the state of Israel.
So I've got a simple message. I will go back to the United States Senate, working with Senator Cruz. I will start an effort to recognize the Golan as part of the state of Israel now and forever, because to give this territory up would be a strategic nightmare for the state of Israel.
I'll start with you, Yariv. Is recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights a good idea in general, and is it a good idea 2 weeks before an election?
First of all, I will not believe before I will see the U.S. Embassy in the Golan Heights. No, I'm kidding. I think that eventually the Golan Heights is different from the West Bank, because we don't have Palestinians there, we don't have Syrians there. It's mostly empty. And the question here is Syria and Lebanon. Today, it's very clear that there is no address for peace in Syria. But in the future, in maybe 1 decade or 2, there will be someone there that we can reach an agreement with Israel that will look like exactly the agreement that we have with Egypt. I will be in favor. And then the whole thing about the Golan Heights is part of Israel will be history.
Right.
So I think that we have to wait and see.
It would be a major gift to Netanyahu, just weeks before the election, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. But one thing that this administration has, as opposed to its predecessor, is the understanding that what helps Israel helps America. And that's a huge difference. And so, yes, it would be a huge gift to Netanyahu. But on the other hand, America looks out for its own interests.
Go ahead.
I think it's another message, very important one. For 70 years, there's been a message sent to the Arabs that aggression is good. Aggression is okay. In 1948, in 1967, in 1973, Syria invaded Israel, and still this territory is considered to be somehow Syrian. So the United States comes and says, no, with all due respect, you invaded, you lost this territory, and I think it has nothing to do with future diplomatic negotiations, because Israel can decide, okay, this is our territory, we can negotiate over it. But that's a very good message in terms of the region.
If this move is going to close the door for peace between Israel, Syria, and Lebanon, I think it's not going to save the Israeli interest for the long run.
I want to talk about the Trump peace plan, which everybody is still waiting for some reason. This is a poll that was done on Palestinian pessimism for this U.S. peace plan. It was done by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research between March 13th and 16th. Very bad numbers. 83% believe Trump is not serious about launching a new peace plan. 79% believe plan will not call for establishment of a Palestinian state. 84% believe the plan will not call for ending of Israeli occupation, and so on and so on. Is there any scenario where this Trump plan, if it comes, is not dead on arrival?
I think that the only option that it will be very similar to the Geneva Accord, very similar to the 67 borders, and then the Palestinian will be able to say yes or maybe even yes but if it's going to be served as like the Netanyahu plan or Bennett plan, that Israel is actually annexing most of the West Bank and the Palestinians stay with nothing, so for sure they are against it, and they're suspicious. They really think that Trump is going to adopt Netanyahu and Bennett plan.
First of all, I hope that they're absolutely right, those Palestinians who say that this plan is not going to be in their favor.
Yeah.
I hope they're right. But it really doesn't matter. Even if that plan were a complete Israeli withdrawal to the 67 borders, I don't know, the right of return of refugees into Israel, name it, they would still reject it because Abbas, President Abbas, has even said, I cannot make a deal with Israel because I will then be viewed as a traitor by my own people.
Right.
Hamas, for sure, is not interested in a deal. It's interested in the annihilation of Israel. And so there's no partner.
And Adi, I'm sure what would add to this depression or pessimism to the Palestinians is the pictures that they saw today of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo at the Western Wall with a prime minister. Those have a lot of significance, images like that.
I actually think that the Trump plan could be a very smart move, because the fact that the Palestinians are going to reject it is not news, because they have rejected everything from 1947. They reject the whole issue. But I think that Trump's move is different. I think they're trying to make some difference between Arab countries such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, etc., and the Palestinians. The problem in our conflict is that the Palestinians always had the backing of the entire Arab world.
Right.
The Palestinians themselves are very weak. If it would be only Israel against the Palestinians, we could have solved it in the 30s. If Trump or if the Arab countries would say to the Palestinians, listen, guys, we're not going to back you. Just handle with what you have, smaller country or whatever, what Trump says, then you'll see the Palestinians going back to their size, and that could be a very optimistic way.
The magic words here are 67. If 67 will be part of the plan, so the Arab League will be in favor, and it will be similar to the Arab League peace plan that Israel reject. But if it's going to be something like annexing to Israel Area C, like Bennett and Netanyahu would like, so then the Arab countries, even the one that has interest with Trump administration, will not back up this plan. I can bet on that.
I think Trump is not expecting the Palestinians to accept it. He's betting on Saudi Arabia to back it, and then to take the Palestinians a little bit calmer and not having the backing of the entire Arab community.
Yeah.
That's, I think, his
purpose. The Arab League in its last meeting didn't even mention the Palestinians. You know, the Arab world really does not care about the Palestinians. And in fact,
just before we go, by the way, we just have a minute left. AIPAC is happening next week. Benny Gantz himself is going to be speaking there for the first time. How do you see this playing out? The elections, in a way, showdown coming to AIPAC.
Well, you know, liberal American Jews will probably cheer him very loudly. They'll also cheer Netanyahu, but I think that they have hopes. You know, we know American Jewry.
Right.
But so what? What does that matter for our election? Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter?
It's going to help both candidates to show that these elections are going to be bipartisan election, and the small parties that are not going to be in AIPAC are going to left behind.
I think it's going to be a challenge for the Democrats, actually, because they have a very interesting moment. Radical Democrats are trying to hijack the party, and that would be interesting.
All the time we have, guys. I'd like to thank my guests, Ruthie Bloom, Yariv Oppenheimer, and Adi Schwartz. Thanks a lot, guys, for coming on the show today.
Thank you.